Hi, this is Natu, a guy who's way too old and way too long involved in this game, and you're watching Thorin's YouTube channel.
With discussion surrounding the current era of CSGO we exist in, which is the Astralis era, and now people have accepted it is indeed an era of dominance. People are trying to contrast it with past eras, with the Fnatic era, NIP's era, SK Gaming's era, and they're trying to figure out who's the number one team of all time. So when we're pinning down this concept, one of the things we need to do, as people have done, is look at the other eras and decide which ones were eras and then contrast them against each other. So one thing I've found interesting is, as much as some people will debate whether or not there in fact was a 2016 era for SK Gaming, since they only won the majors and then a couple of other tournaments, they didn't win a lot of tournaments. I saw some people saying, why isn't there a 2017 SK Gaming era? I mean, this is the year where at the end of the year, they said they'd won 7 out of 8 finals, I think was the stat they said. Obviously, there was the period of time where they won a whole bunch of tournaments in the middle of the year. Towards the end of the year, they became the number one team. So, first of all, yes, in 2016, there was an SK Gaming era. That's one thing distinct in itself. And that's by virtue of the fact they did win 2 majors. And they won those 2 majors in pretty dominant fashion, only losing 1 map each time. So 2 maps over 2 entire majors. Yeah, you can contest it, or you can say it's the weakest of the eras, whichever you want. But they still had some very solid results outside of majors, even when they didn't win them, when they made finals and semi-finals. So I think that you can't really contest the concept it is an era very successfully. That'd have to be debated. Now, when it comes to the 2017 lineup, though, this is the one where when you say something like they won 5 out of 6 events during the summer, or they won 7 out of 8 finals, it really doesn't tell the whole story, and you really have to look into the specifics of what happened in those results to see why this isn't an era. So first of all, when we talk about eras, we're talking about a 5-man lineup. So for example, Fnatic winning 6 straight tournaments when they got Dennis going from late 2015 to early 2016 doesn't count unless you want to try and argue it as its own era. It doesn't add in to what Pronax and Fnatic accomplished over 2015 going back into 2014 with that specific 5-man lineup. That's not part of their era. So in 2017, we have 2 distinct periods for 2 distinct 5-man lineups. We have the lineup that had Phelps, where he came in to replace FNX, and they won 5 out of 6 tournaments over a span of time in the summer. Then we have the lineup that had Bolts, where he replaced Phelps. This team was able, towards the end of the year, to win 3 out of 4 titles in terms of tournaments that they played in. You can't include both of these particular periods as being under the umbrella of one era, because we're talking about a single 5-man lineup. So here's the context of the summer run, and I'm going to be able to show you this from the wikis so you can follow it as I go through it. So here we go. The first event that the team had was CS Summit, but let's talk about how did they get there. Let's go to the results page over here. So if we go to the bottom of the year, 2017, if people remember, FNS left after the last game of E-League Season 2, where they lost to Astralis on train and had their train streak snapped, I think it was 17 wins. FNS was kicked. They brought in Fox. He played as a stand-in for ECS Season 2. They managed to make top 4 there. He played as a stand-in for the E-League Major Atlanta. They managed to get top 4 there. And for the first event that they used Phelps was DreamHack Masters Las Vegas. This was the tournament where he came in. They managed to have a pretty good run overall. Like, they finished 2nd place. They have a pretty strong finish overall. Admittedly, they had the weaker side of the bracket. They didn't have Virtus.pro and Astralis on their side of the bracket, but whatever. Still pretty good run all in all. Then came the tough times, because then came the 2 tournaments at which this team bombed completely. They didn't make the playoffs at the IEM World Championship. They didn't make the playoffs at Star Series Season 3. They lost to FaZe in a key game on train. There's the last one in the Swiss system. Then comes the summer run. So this part here is the summer run. CS Summit, IEM Sydney, EPL Season 5, DreamHack Open Summer, ECS Season 3 Finals, and ends with ESL One Cologne. These are the 6 tournaments that people talk about when they talk about the 5 out of 6 tournaments. So let's discuss these, shall we? CS Summit's the first one. It started on the 20th of April, 420 as it were. So this is the context. At the start of this summer run, in my rankings, SK Gaming was ranked number 4. Now, at the time they go to this tournament, CS Summit, you're going to see here, it's a tournament that takes place in a house. It has no stage environment. It's not a huge prestigious event. In fact, it was the first one that Beyond the Summit had run in CSGO. You go and you look at some of the teams there, and First of all, prize purse, 150k first total prize pools, not a massive event. It's got 63,000 for first place. You go and you look at this tournament, and what you will see is the tournament list. Okay, so let's look at the teams that are invited. So SK Gaming were ranked 4th. They're here. Who else here is ranked? Only one other team of the 8 teams, they were all invited, there was no qualifiers, was actually a top 10 ranked team in my rankings, which was Gambit Esports, which at the time were ranked number 7. And this was when Gambit, I know months from now they would go on to win the major, but this is when they were just a pure best of 1 upset team. This is when they had those amazing streaks on Cobblestone and on Overpass, and they were upsetting everyone in best of 1s and in group stages and Swiss systems, but they weren't a team with some deep finishes in the big international tournaments. So that's the only ranked team there, was Gambit Esports. You look at the other teams, nobody else is ranked. Cloud9 doesn't even have Skadoodle. They had Swag as a stand-in. Team Liquid has just changed to get, I think this is when they maybe had just gotten Twists into the lineup. I'm not entirely sure. I forget on that one. Maybe it was when Stanislaw joined. Godsent was a train wreck at the time. Optic Gaming was when, obviously, Stanislaw had left to Team Liquid and they were using his as a stand-in. And so actually at that point in time, and then you had NIP, who, in fact, maybe Optic was ranked, but maybe ranked carryover from before. I don't think so, though. NIP with Draken in the lineup, obviously was in terrible shape. This is when they hadn't even made it to that major. Envious was a train wreck with their new lineup after the roster swap. This wasn't a tournament with very strong field of teams, quite frankly. SK lost 1 map to Cloud9 on train. They beat Gambit fairly easily, 2-0 in the upper bracket final. In the grand final, they played Gambit. They started with a 1-map advantage. Gambit did win a map. They won an Inferno, which later on went to be a good map, including to go along with Cobble and Overpass before they went into the major and became a legit team. But they won cash easily. They won the series. All in all, they won the tournament with only 2 maps lost entirely. And that was the end of that one. So not a massive tournament, more like a tier 2 tournament. SK were the only ones there really giving it true legitimacy. There were even DreamHack Opens that had better overall fields than this. Not a massive tournament, right? So not really the start of any kind of an era or a performance like that, right? So let's go to the next tournament, which was about less than a month later, a few weeks later, was IEM Sydney. This was the first time that IEM went to Sydney in terms of CSGO. And this was an 8-team tournament, so it's not one of those ones with 12 or 16 or 24 teams. It was a tournament where they invited 6 teams, and they had a Chinese qualifier, ended up being Vici Gaming, and they had an Oceanic qualifier, ended up being Chiefs. And Chiefs, obviously, not a bad team from that region. But you look at these squads here. So, first of all, the tournament format is they have an 8-team Swiss system. Not a huge fan of that, but whatever, not bad, I guess. Which then goes into a 4-team bracket, so no quarterfinals, only top 4s really count as reasonable placings here. And then you go and look at the teams. So they have 2 Australian teams. They have Renegades who got invited because it's an Australian event. And you have Chiefs who came from the qualifier. You have a Chinese team. So already take those 3 teams out of the equation. Not very good teams, right? You have Optic, but with Hazed, because obviously Stanislaw's not in the team anymore. Then you have these 4 really good teams. Now what you have here is you have the number 1 team in the world, Astralis. You have the number 2 team in the world, I think at this point in time, was it? I think this might already have been, I think number 2 was Virtus.pro, they weren't here. You had the number 3 team in the world was FaZe Clan. You had SK themselves ranked number 4, and I think at the time North was ranked number 6. So you had some very good teams. You didn't have Virtus.pro, but you had some very good teams, some elite teams in these 3. You had a very good team here, you had an okay team here, and then you had some fairly weak teams. So this is a weird event because on the one hand, it has some very strong teams, but the field itself is generally weaker once you get past the elite teams. The format's not exactly the most sturdy, although it's not a bad one, right? All in all, SK easy time in the Swiss system. They crushed that. They beat North. They beat Astralis. They went through to the playoffs. They got Optic, a very easy Optic to beat. They thrashed them completely. In the final, they played FaZe Clan, a team that had just won Star Ladder, the tournament that SK had bombed out of a few months earlier. Considered to be FaZe's time to be the number 1 team to take over from Astralis, but SK beats them here. You see there's some close maps. FaZe manages to win on Inferno. SK was dropping a few Infernos back then, but key wins on Train and Overpass mean that the series goes to SK Gaming. All in all, not the biggest event, but a pretty good event thanks to the quality of some of the teams there, if you look at it. So then we go to this. So they've got 2 titles in a row there, 1 small, 1 bigger, but not the biggest. Then we come to the EPL Season 5 finals, so Pro League finals. And this is, again, a few weeks after Sydney. We'll go and look at the field here. Obviously, it's online qualification, right? So unfortunately, this was one of the events where some of the top online teams didn't qualify. So you go and you look, you didn't have Astralis, the number 1 ranked team in the world. You didn't have FaZe, the number 3 ranked team in the world. You didn't have Virtus Pro at this point in time, the number 4 ranked team in the world, according to my rankings. All you had was SK Gaming, who I think was number 2 ranked at this point in time. You did have Navi, who was number 5 ranked, so that's pretty legit. You had G2 was number 7 ranked, you had North was number 8 ranked, and you had Immortals was number 9 ranked. So not bad, but basically SK is the only elite competition there, except for... Well, no, that's it. None of the other top 4 teams except SK are in attendance. G2 at the time, like I said, Navi's ranked 5. G2's ranked number 7. So, again, SK favoured to win the event. None of their other contenders there. Then you look at what happened in the group stage. SK went 3-2. Barely made it in there. They were in a tie with Fnatic, Envious, G2. So, SK barely makes it through to the playoffs. Even though they went 3-0 initially, their main problem is they then lost to G2, who ended up being one of their kind of kryptonites over the year, and they lost to Envious, the other French team, in that inexplicable game where, if you remember, I think it was the one where RPK went absolutely nuts. So then you look at the playoffs. So because they finished 5th to 6th in terms of like their playoff, they have to play an initial first round. They played Mouse Sports, easily took care of them. This is, I think, before Mouse Sports got Rops in the lineup. Then they played G2. Problem is, G2 took care of them, 2 16-12 games. Kenny S went off. This is where we first established the whole G2 is the counter, is the kryptonite to SK Gaming, and this is where it started to be the case. So SK did not win this tournament. They finished top 4 at a tournament without any of the other top 4 teams in the world, and that's a disappointing result, right? So this is the one that they didn't win in the whole 5 out of 6. But big tournament, big kind of field, good prize money, solid format. I wouldn't say the best. Problem is lacking some of the teams due to online qualification. So it's not SK's fault, but it does take away how impressive the tournament win is overall. And they didn't win this tournament anyway. They actually were in a position where they just finished top 4, right? So kind of underwhelming in that sense. Then you go ahead and you look at DreamHack Summer came right after this. And this was, again, let's have a look how long after it is. Well, we're talking about a couple of weeks. Yeah, like 2 weeks after, basically. DreamHack Summer. Now, I know back in the day, DreamHack Summer was a big thing, right? This is when DreamHack Summer and Winter, the seasonal events, were nowhere near as big. In fact, this one wasn't a particularly big tournament overall entirely. This is the one where you start with 2 best of 1s, and that can get you out of the group. And then you have an 8-team tournament, 6 teams invited, Europe qualifier, North America qualifier. Then you have top 4 single elim, best of 3 bracket, and see who the champion is. Now, the problem here, again, is you've got to look at the field initially. So let's go ahead and look here. So the field doesn't feature FaZe, number 1 team in the world. They don't feature G2, at this point in time, number 3 ranked team in the world. Doesn't feature Astralis, the number 4 ranked team in the world. Doesn't feature North, the number 5 ranked team in the world. It doesn't feature Hellraisers, the number 6 ranked team in the world. The only team out of the top 6 ranked in the world to attend was SK Gaming themselves. It did feature Gambit, the number 7 ranked team in the world, who admittedly was better than the Gambit from the CS Summit because they just won one of the DreamHack Opens. I think DreamHack Open Austin, perhaps, at this point in time. They were the only ranked team in attendance of the 8, though. And so, again, underwhelming field. Not a massive, super prestigious tournament. 50,000 for first place, only 100,000 for the whole tournament. So one of the smaller events all in all. Then you go and look here. SK didn't win their group. They lost a best of 1 to Immortals on cash. Then they 2-0'd Mouse Sports in the decider to get out of the groups. In the semi-finals, they ended up shockingly playing CLG, who had actually shocked that group over there and even finished ahead of Gambit for a second, the only other ranked team. CLG actually, impressively, was able to win a map. They won Mirage, which is one of SK's stronger maps. But SK came back on train, on Cobblestone. They won the series. They went into the final. In the final, they played Fnatic. But you have to remember, this was Fnatic who'd just gotten back Olaf Meister and Flasher and all those guys back together. And they had them for a few months at this point in time. But they hadn't been a very good team. They hadn't been making playoffs of tournaments. This was one of their first notable playoff runs, actually. And even though they won Overpass, surprisingly, actually not a traditional Fnatic map, SK won Inferno, won Mirage quite easily, and won the tournament generally without a whole lot of difficulty. So now we've already gotten through 4 events. We saw that one was a small one was like a bigger one but not the biggest, one was a big event but with not a very good field, and this one was like a small to medium event with an okay to not very good field and none of the elite teams in attendance. Now let's go to the 5th event, which is the ECS Season 3 Finals. And at this tournament, Again, let's look at the format. We have an 8-team tournament. Obviously, you qualify online, just like you did for EPL. Again, best of ones. 2 best of ones get someone through to the semi-finals. Then there's a best of 3 decider for the other team. 2 4-team best of 1 GSL-style groups into 4-team single elim bracket in the finals best of 3 as well. So let's start here. Luckily, this tournament had a nice field. Okay, it didn't have a huge field, but in terms of teams, they literally had the top 4 teams in the world. Because they had number 1 ranked FaZe, they had number 2 ranked SK Gaming, they had number 3 ranked G2 Esports, who's just won EPL, they had the number 4 ranked Astralis. Okay, that's a fucking good field of teams, right? What do you got to complain about there? Only 4 teams from Europe can qualify. They've got 3 of the top 4 teams in the world. They also had Fnatic, who's just come off that pretty decent DreamHack Summer result, even though they're not a top team at the time. They're missing, okay, someone like North, the number 5 team, but they just didn't qualify because it's online. Fnatic, yeah, not as good as North at this point in time, but not an appalling team. You go and look over here, Cloud9, Team Liquid, Optic. We expect these kinds of teams to come out of NA, even though at the time they weren't ranked squads overall. In the group stage, SK is able to beat G2 in a best of 1. They're able to beat FaZe in a best of 1. Pretty legit opponents, and they get through to the semi-finals. In the semi-finals, they play against Astralis. They have this really close series that was really competitive. Astralis won on Overpass. SK came back with a 16-14 on Mirage. They came up with a 16-12 on Inferno. Through they go to the final. They play FaZe there. Similar scenario. They lose the first map, Mirage, but they come back. They win Inferno in overtime. They win Train in overtime. This is one of the closest finals I've seen in a long time. I thought FaZe really looked like they were going to get their revenge finally on SK, establish themselves as number 1 in the world and go into the major as the favourite. Instead, SK managed to win it in a tournament that, yes, not the biggest field, not the widest field, not the biggest tournament in the scene, but you know what? Very good prize money, very good first place, top 4 teams in the world. This was a very legit one. You look at their results. This is the most legit of their run so far, and absolutely stands as a big international tournament. 1 tournament left, and this is going to be ESL One Cologne 2017. So let's have a look at the date on this one. This one is going to be about a week and a half after ECS Season 3. So we go to this one. It's a tournament with 16 teams in it. It's ESL One Cologne. They invited the top 12, it looks like, and then they had a North America qualifier, a Europe qualifier, and a China qualifier. So let's look at the teams that are in attendance. Now, there was no Astralis, but at this point in time, Astralis is ranked number 4 in the world. There was no Hellraisers, who ranked number 6 in the world, and there was no Gambit, who was ranked number 7, because famously Cloud9 got invited instead of Gambit. So we're lacking some of the top teams, but you know what? There are some very good teams here. We've got FaZe Clan, ranked number 1. We've got G2, ranked number 3. We've got North Clan, ranked North. We've got North, ranked number 5. We've got Na'Vi, who at the time was ranked number 8. We've got Team Liquid, who's ranked number 9. We've got Optic, who's ranked number 9. Number 10 rather, even though at the time still got Hazed instead of that scenario. Now in the Swiss system, SK goes 3-2. They lose to Space Soldier, shockingly, the Kryptonite G2, but they beat Virtus.pro, they beat North, they beat Mirage, Fnatic on Mirage in the decider, and through they go to the playoff bracket. In the playoff bracket, it's a single elim 8-team playoff bracket. They play Optic Gaming. Optic actually surprises them and wins Mirage. SK comes back handedly to win Cash and Cobblestone. Through they go to the semi-finals. They play FaZe Clan. Same team they've actually just beaten in 3 finals. The IEM final. What else would there be? IEM final. ECS final. Is that really it? Was that it? Maybe this was the 3rd time they played them. I don't fucking know. But they played them here. I believe this was like the 4th series they'd played. And FaZe smashes them on Overpass, the map they always won against FaZe, and then a close overtime win on Cash. SK gets past FaZe, they go into the final. Surprisingly, they don't play G2, they don't play Na'Vi, the ranked teams, because G2 gets beaten by Na'Vi, Na'Vi gets beaten by Cloud9, and then SK takes care of Cloud9. Sure, couple of close maps, but still a 3-0. You're still winning on your opponent's map picks, and obviously the Cobblestone map, pretty convincing overall. So this one's a pretty legit one, pretty respectable. As a result, SK Gaming headed into the major as the favourites to actually win the tournament. They unfortunately didn't win the major because obviously they played Astralis in the quarterfinals and Device went ham and they got eliminated 5th to 8th. Funnily enough, they didn't make another final that year with Phelps. They later on changed to Bolts and had the 3 out of 4 tournaments. Was this an era? No, this wasn't an era. Like, the 5 out of 6 tournaments just don't add up to one, because there was only 4 big events in there. One of them they didn't win, the EPL one, which had an underpowered field anyway. The IEM one was, okay, had some of the elite teams there, but not such a sick field overall and a limited format. ECS, limited field, but a very good tournament, some very good teams, a really good one there. And then other than that, 2 smaller event wins anyway. CS Summit, no top teams generally anyway. Some pretty weak teams actually, not a big tournament. DreamHack Summer, maybe a mildly bigger tournament, but actually also not very good teams there overall. Not a great format. So no, this was nowhere close to an era for SK in 2017. It was impressive, and it did put them at number 1 in the rankings and made them a favourite to win the major, PGL Krakow, that they didn't win, but it was not an era. This video was kindly supported by Dean Tanglis, Andreas, Snazore Westerlund, Gardner Wilson, OllieJ, Tobias Bernasconi, NateDOhDoubleG, James Harding, Kyla Harris, Travis Greb, Daniel Yordanov, and as always, a special thanks goes out to Jerky's Minion. Would you like to suggest a topic or a guest for some of my upcoming content? Perhaps you want to ask me a question in my monthly AMA. Do you want to see some teasers? See who's going to be the next guest on one of my shows? Maybe you want to take part in an esports discussion with me. Well, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today at the Patreon link in the description box below.